When you read through the Bible, some verses just jump off the page. Have you ever come across the one that talks about the most powerful earthquake in history? It's described as an event so massive, so world-shattering, that nothing like it has ever happened before or since. So let's dive into this, because what if the most powerful way to read this verse isn't about a future disaster at all, but about a moment that already happened, a moment that changed everything forever?
Wow, just listen to those words from Revelation chapter 16. This is describing the absolute climax of God's judgment being poured out on the earth. The language here is it's so dramatic, so final. It's talking about a single event that has absolutely no parallel in all of human history.
And right away, that brings up the huge question that's going to guide us through this whole explainer. Is this verse pointing to some literal future cataclysm that we should all be looking out for? Or could it be using the language of apocalypse to paint a picture of a past event, something that's already taken place? That's the mystery we're going to try and solve.
To get started, we really need to look at the words themselves, because the original language gives us our first major clue, and it reveals a scale that is so much bigger than just a simple tremor on the ground.
Okay, so the Greek phrase used here is seismos megas. Now, seismos is fascinating. Yeah, it means earthquake, but it also implies something much bigger, a foundational upheaval, a shaking of the entire order of things. We're not just talking about a tremor here, we're talking about a complete cosmic shift.
And the writer really wants to make sure you get it. He doesn't just say it once. The original text actually repeats itself for dramatic effect, saying, "So mighty an earthquake, and so great." It's like a literary way of grabbing you by the shoulders and screaming, "Pay attention, there has been absolutely nothing else like this." The uniqueness of this event is the whole key. So now that we get the sheer magnitude of this thing, let's try and decode the symbols. Because to the original audience, hearing about thunder, lightning, and earthquakes wasn't just hearing about the weather. Nope, it was a well-known code for something way, way bigger. And this right here just lays it out so clearly. Look at the parallels between what's happening in Revelation and the description of God coming down on Mount Sinai back in the book of Exodus. It's the exact same imagery: thunders, lightnings, and a massive quake. This is basically the biblical signature for the direct, powerful presence of God showing up. So you can almost think of it like a formula. When you see thunders and lightnings, that means God's holy presence is there. When you see earthquakes, that's a sign of divine judgment and power. And when you put them together, it signals an apocalyptic moment, a time when the old systems get shaken right down to their very foundations. Okay, so let's piece this together. We have an unparalleled, foundational shaking, and it's described with the classic symbols of God's holy presence and His judgment. These clues aren't pointing to some random future disaster. They seem to be pointing to one specific, history-altering moment.
Just remember our mystery verse from Revelation, an earthquake so great it had no equal in all of human history.
Okay, now listen to this. This is the Gospel of Matthew's account of the exact moment Jesus died on the cross. The earth did quake, and the rocks rent. The language is unmistakable. There is no way that's a coincidence. These two events are being deliberately connected.
And right here, this is the core idea. The seismos megas, the greatest earthquake ever recorded, isn't about geology, it's about theology. It's the Bible's apocalyptic description of Calvary. At that moment, the entire Old Covenant system was shaken to its core, and access to God was changed for everyone, forever.
But what does it even mean for a spiritual earthquake to fulfill judgment? This is where the symbolism gets incredibly deep and, honestly, pretty profound.
The Apostle Paul kind of explains this spiritual transaction. He says that at the cross, the full judgment for all sin was poured out onto Jesus. So that imagery back in Revelation, the thunder, the lightning, the great earthquake, that's a vision of that exact moment. It's the cosmic force of divine judgment being totally and completely met and satisfied.
And this really forces us to reframe what we think judgment even means. It's not just about punishment. The Bible presents it as God's righteous presence, actively setting things right. It's about justice, it's about correction, and it's about purification. It's an act so powerful and so good that righteous people actually desire it, because it means God is finally restoring balance to everything.
So how does a massive cosmic event that restores balance become personal for you and me? Well, this is maybe the most surprising part of this whole connection. It takes this huge, world-altering event and brings it right down to a simple, individual choice.
It all started with Jesus' own baptism. When he spoke these words, he was willingly stepping onto a path that he knew would lead directly to the cross. It was a path to fulfill all righteousness by taking on the righteous judgment of God himself. This lays it out perfectly. You see, Jesus' baptism is where the journey begins. He says yes to the path. The cross is the destination, where God's righteous judgment is fully met. And our baptism? Well, that's our moment to connect with that whole story. It's a public declaration that we agree with God's verdict on sin and we're ready to embrace the new life offered through Jesus.
So the key takeaway here is this. When a person is baptized, they are saying their own personal amen to the judgment that was fulfilled on the cross. They're agreeing that their old life is judged and done with, and that their new life is now found in Jesus, the one who went through that cosmic earthquake for them.
And that leaves us with one final thought to just kind of chew on. If an event that's described in such terrifying, cataclysmic terms can actually be read as a symbolic portrait of the cross, well, what other parts of prophecy might we be reading literally when they're actually pointing us back to the finished work of Jesus? It's a question that can change the way you read everything.